The man in their protective suit lifted the isolation door and was immediately shocked by the scene in front of him. The air was filled with nuclear dust that exceeded radiation levels. The front walls were completely shattered. No complete body could be found. The survivors hiding in the shelter were both shocked and grateful at the same time. No one expected this world to disappear so quickly. And after that, they will bear the responsibility of continuing human civilization in the shelter 300 meters underground. As for the series hero, Max, before the disaster, he was a wealthy heir living a reckless life. But the car accident completely changed the course of his life. In that accident, Max left his girlfriend who was about to die and fled alone. In the end, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison for manslaughter. After entering prison, Max suffered from sadness and guilt, and his immense wealth brought him no comfort, but rather made him the primary target for humiliation until the day came when his fellow inmates pushed him into a spinning washer. Max suffered on the brink of death for a full 16 minutes. And when he was pulled out, Max felt that all the pains of his life had ended, as if he was reborn. He staggered to his feet and began to laugh loudly in the face of his fellow inmates who were mistreating him. His brave act earned everyone's admiration. Since then, Max completely got rid of the days of bullying and started actively exercising. His outstanding performance in daily intense training and matches quickly earned him the respect of his fellow inmates. In this cheerful atmosphere, he gradually began to forget the pain. However, happy times are always short. In the 3rd year of his imprisonment, he suddenly received a notice of sentence reduction due to his good behavior during his time in prison. Max could now leave the prison amid the loud cheers of the inmates. This man left the prison with elegance, and when he saw his father Rafa standing at the door, Max's expression was very cold. It turned out that the relationship between father and son had been soured since the car accident. Suddenly, 2 fighter jets flew over their heads. Rafa told Max with a serious face that to get him out of prison early, he used extensive connections and a lot of money. Now the external situation is extremely tense, and he must go with him to a highly secret shelter. Max felt a strong resistance in his heart as he had just gotten out of prison and didn't want to return to any underground cage. However, his father expressed concern and explained that Max's mother and grandmother had already arrived at the shelter, along with his late girlfriend's father. The last sentence made Max pause. He felt it was time to face past mistakes. On the way to the shelter, Rafa told his son about the origin of the shelter. He met a senior military officer at the tennis club and learned by chance that some of the country's elites were secretly building a Doomsday shelter. The father spent almost all his assets to obtain a valuable entry ticket. This morning, he received a notice from the bunker manager that the global situation had approached the brink of chaos and requested all residents to enter the bunker immediately. As soon as the father and son boarded the helicopter, they received a notice from Civil Aviation Control, and it seems that the bunker manager's fears were not unfounded. To prevent the location of Faye Bunker from being leaked, all passengers were asked to wear blindfolds during their flight. The helicopter finally landed on a bridge in the middle of the lake. The staff guided the father and son to the elevator entrance. The bunker was built 300 meters underground, relying on a cave formed 45 million years ago, and it can withstand most nuclear attacks. Additionally, there is a natural gas field beneath the bunker that can meet the needs of 45 families for Khmers. It wasn't long before the father and son reached the reception desk of the shelter, where the staff collected their communication devices, explaining that it was to prevent tracking. The construction of this shelter took 7 years, and its total perimeter alone is 20,000 meters. With highly integrated internal facilities, the clothing worn by the residents can monitor radiation levels and air quality in real time, while a team dressed in yellow uniforms provides service and protection to the residents. Upon entering the reception hall, which can change the external views, Max finally met his mother and grandmother, while his father, Rafa, was watching the news on the big screen. The Russian defense minister held an emergency press conference and stated that he would respond strongly to some provocative actions. The family headed to the restaurant to eat and encountered a deceased friend's family, which immediately made the atmosphere tense. Max expressed his guilt very sincerely. But the girl's father, Gilmore, made calm. It is clear that he has not forgiven this person who caused his daughter's death. The two families were once very close, but after that tragedy, the relationships were completely severed. Callum introduced his new wife politely, and it turned out that half a year after his daughter's death, his former wife also died in a car accident. Callum was a polite speaker and showed no hatred towards Max, but his friend's sister, Ashia, was not the same. She did not hesitate to mock during the meal, wondering how someone could be so cruel as to leave his girlfriend dying. He remembered that unforgettable night again, yet he offered no explanation. When the awkward became more overt, the manager of the shelter entered the dining room with the staff. First, he informed everyone of the bad news that the war in the Atlantic had escalated, and he asked everyone to be prepared to stay in the shelter for a long time. Then the manager emphasized some matters that need attention. Given the limited number of staff in the shelter, residents must do some simple tasks, like going to get food themselves and washing their dishes after eating. These things seem simple, but they are not good news for those wealthy people accustomed to luxury. Given the dangerous situation outside, everyone had no choice but to temporarily suppress their discontent, as this is not their private home. After returning to the room, Gilmore couldn't maintain his outward calm while eating. Several times, he wanted to stab Max's head with a fork. In the Gilmore's view, this killer who caused his daughter's death is nothing but a scoundrel skilled in pretending. His stepson tried to console her, but that was met with a rebuke from Gilman. Max met his girlfriend's sister, Ashia, at the gym, and he didn't want his girlfriend's sister to live in constant hatred, so he took out the mobile phone his girlfriend left at the scene. Ashia immediately returned to the bedroom to check the album on it. The videos her sister recorded were mostly intimate clips with Max. Seeing the smile that filled her sister's face, it was hard for her to believe that Max could do something so cruel. The depressed Gilmore came to the restaurant to drink, but he was informed that each resident is limited to 2 cups per day. He was preparing to comment with words, when suddenly the bar shook, and the restaurant screen started flashing. The next moment, sirens blared sharply. The shelter was under attack. Everyone is asked to head to the dome in the basement, as it is the safest area in the shelter. At this time, the entire shelter was shaking violently, and everyone was screaming and running in all directions. Things made their way against the crowd to the bar, and she saw Max and his son supporting their father to leave. At that moment, she felt somewhat moved and even began to feel that Max wasn't that bad. Everyone quickly headed to the elevator, but they didn't expect an emergency to occur halfway, where the elevator lost control and started to fall rapidly downward. Everyone screamed in despair. Unfortunately, the emergency brake was activated in time, saving them from the brink of death. They exited the elevator in a state of panic and joined the others rushing towards the safe area in the dome. The whole screens were displaying global news in real time. The war situation had completely spiraled out of control, and most countries were engulfed in this war, which brought everyone's morale to its lowest point. Did the World War really come at this time? The attendant approached the platform to inform everyone that the NATO base located south of the shelter had been subjected to a nuclear attack, and due to the proximity of the site, the shelter felt a noticeable tremor. The external situation is very complicated right now, so please everyone remain calm. At least this shelter is the safest place in the world. As a result, as soon as he finished speaking, the mushroom cloud from the nuclear explosion appeared on several screens, followed by a signal cutoff, and even the bridge outside the shelter was destroyed by the blast wave, and with a huge roar, the entire hall was plunged into darkness. And the servant expressed concern that he must go to the control center, do what the Escalation and lol anchor voicens. They had mustered the shelter to avoid nuclear war, that they did not expect the state to come so quickly. As the war approached disruption, Raph decided to reveal the truth about the car accident. In fact, Max did not abandon his girlfriend. He called his father for help. At the first moment, Raph rushed to the scene, and to clear his son who had been drinking, he forced him to flee and hide in the forest. But at the trial, Raph couldn't bear the guilt and decided to tell the truth. He didn't want to use lies to help his son evade responsibility. In the end, Max was sentenced to 5 years in prison. This hidden truth greatly shocked both families. The grandmother was angry with her son-in-law for his constant labeling, which caused her grandson to waste 3 years of his life. However, Max's mother stood firmly by her husband, as she saw that rash actions were helping her son achieve redemption. At this time, the servant came out to announce that he had just confirmed with the staff that there was a malfunction in the antenna connected outside, and staff must be sent to repair it. To keep everyone informed about the external situation in a timely manner, he will set up a live broadcast of the repair. At this time, the security manager, along with one of his assistants, had put on protective clothing, and under the anxious eyes of everyone, the two opened the heavy isolation door. The outside scene looked like the end of the world, with nuclear dust flying everywhere, radiation in the air dangerously exceeding limits, and even the temperature continuing to rise. When burned bodies appeared in the camera footage, everyone's eyes widened in horror as the brutality and the apocalypse exceeded their imagination. At this moment, the monitors appeared a warning that the temperature and radiation levels were still rising rapidly, leaving the two with nothing but to hurry and install the antenna. However, during the process, the technician's glove stuck to the hot metal railing, making it impossible for him to install the antenna, and he had to tear the gloves with a screwdriver. Now it was impossible to complete the task, and the manager had no choice but to order the two to return to the shelter. After going through purification and sterilization processes, the technicians entered the isolation room, but due to the torn gloves, they were certainly exposed to large amounts of radiation. The staff quickly turned off the camera in concern, which increased the tension among the wealthy survivors. The attendant tried to calm them with a few ineffective words, then turned and left the hall. As he passed through the secret code door, his worried expression disappeared immediately. The employees in the control room began clapping happily. It turned out that all of this was a carefully planned trick, but what was their goal? Is it just a hoax to gain wealth or a test of human nature at the end of the world? If you want to know the answer, please stay tuned. See you in the next episode.